Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is Idealistically, which is my podcast. My name is Tolmeia Gregory. Most people call me Tolly. I'm 21 and I am a climate justice activist and an artist, and I'm from Cheltenham, so my walk here was very short. As this is being recorded, we are at the Cheltenham Literature Festival at the VOICEBOX pop-up, which is very exciting. A little bit of background about why I started the podcast and why I started Idealistically. It was an idea that came to me during the pandemic in lockdown, and I realised that as a person within the climate space who cares about the planet, that we do a lot of talking about what we're fighting against rather than what we're fighting for. And as much as that's so important to, go to protests, shout about what we care about, it's also really important to talk about what we actually want after that, what happens next, what is going to be there in our ideal world. So that is what Idealistically is. It's a podcast where we talk about what we would idealistically want in an ideal world. And today I'm really excited that I have a guest with me who I've known for many years, and I respect their work so much and I've learned so much from them. And on my podcast, I like to get all my guests to introduce themselves. So would you like to do that?
Sure. My name is Aja Barber, and I am a writer. And I met Tolly in the Instagram space because we both think that fast fashion isn't really good for us. It's not good for the planet. It's not good for the people. And we became friends through a collective wanting to create space on Instagram where people aren't being sold new things every single moment. And we've had a lot of fun getting to know each other, because the thing about this conversation is that it doesn't have to be unfun. Actually, we have a lot of fun talking about sustainable style and learning new ways to reinvent things that we already have in our wardrobe. And I think we just want that for everyone. And when it comes to the climate emergency, obviously, a lot of the things that we're facing are big and scary issues, but the fashion industry accounts for a portion of that. And so if there's one thing that I think that we can all sort of really get into and sink our teeth into it, it's this conversation. I think we can all find things that we can do to sort of lessen the burden of the current fashion industry. And so that's what we aim to do.
Yeah, amazing. And obviously we're at the Literature Festival. You have a new book out, your first book, Consumed, The Need for Collective Change, which goes into the fashion industry, colonialism, the climate crisis, everything that's connected. And I believe we do have some copies for sale over there, so please make sure you pick up a copy at the end. We're going to jump...
Thank you for doing that for me, by the way. I appreciate it.
It's an amazing book. I rushed through it because it was just so good. Not rushed, that's not the wrong word. I sped through it. What I like to do to start off is to get a feel for where we're at the moment, because when we care about the planet, there's a lot of ups and downs. Some days we have good days, some days we have bad days. So at the moment, whereabouts are you? Do you find it easy to envision an ideal world, or is it a bit trickier at the moment?
I know what the ideal world looks like, and I can envision it, but the barriers that we have are still there. And I've just come from the TED Climate Countdown conference, which was in Edinburgh. I actually came from there today. And I have to say there's still not enough people in the room that aren't getting that their business model of constant extraction is a huge part of the problem. They want to come to the conference. They want to talk about the solution without changing things from the ground up. And there was some actions to hold people to account. And I thought that was good. That gave me hope.
I'm happy to briefly talk about that, because it's something that has brought me hope that in the past day, really. It was seeing a fellow youth climate activist be able to share the stage with the CEO of Shell, fossil fuel company. And it was just one of the most moving things I've ever seen, was seeing her just be so honest about Shell's impact, stating the facts to the CEO in his face, being very vulnerable and emotional about it, and just calling it as it is. Like,
because Ted was going to let him sit up there and lie, and I'm tired of the lies. I am tired of it. There's too much at stake. I am done with it, and so it's time for us to get real about who is doing the damage and who needs to stop what they're doing immediately.
And yeah, so I think that brings us both a bit of hope, is just seeing people actually call it out as it is. So let's do a little bit of imagining. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you envision an ideal world? Yeah, close your eyes. What is it?
The joy that we have in this current world. And I know that it's been a really tough time, so we haven't had as much joy as we all deserve, but there's still joy everywhere I look, and connecting with people, and, a lot of what we do on social media, even though we tell hard truths, can also be quite joyful. There's nothing like making a company worth billions of dollars have to apologize for lying to the general public. I get a lot of joy out of that. If you do it for any reason, do it for spite.
I've done similar things, like sitting in the local H&M window with a thing which said "fuck H&M" on it.
That was joyful.
That was pretty freaking joyful.
That came in my feed. It brought me a lot of joy. I thought, I really appreciate just the work that you do, and I think that there's something really beautiful about it. And so, I think we can have a lot of joy in these conversations. It doesn't all have to be doom and gloom. We can talk about it.
What's an example of joy and what it looks like in your life?
Joy. Let's see. Joy is laughing with a friend over a cup of tea. Joy is seeing people sneak in the door. Joy is sitting in a room with people and sharing imaginative, hopeful thoughts for a future that we all want. Joy is being reunited with friends that you've not seen for years. There's so many small joys. Joy is when my cat comes and cuddles with me for no reason at all. And cats, man, you take it where you can get it, because they don't dish it out all the time. So get it where you got it.
I'm a cat lover too, so I'm very much.
You know what? I'm a reluctant one. And I love mine, and some days they love me too.
I have a family cat who's also a black cat, and I feel like black cats, they just have their own very special kind of energy. And
that's one way of putting it.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other conversation. Black cats. So this is a question which is often quite tricky for my guests, which is, what would you keep from this version of reality for your ideal world? Because it can be tricky when we get caught up on all the bad things.
What would I keep? The things that you do with friends that don't involve constant consumption. Going to a museum, witnessing some art, going for a walk in the park, things that don't actually involve any sort of transaction, because with the system of extraction, I find we tend to substitute things that shouldn't be transactional as transactions. And I think the joy of getting back to self-care without the materialism tied to it, because that's another thing that happens on social media. Something like self-care comes about buying this and buying that and buying, and that doesn't always have to be what self-care is, and it shouldn't be what it is. So, fulfilling self-care without transactional consumption, I think, is something beautiful that I would keep from this world.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like you've touched on themes about that in consumption, obviously, in your book. And something I've mentioned before on my podcast is having memories of growing up, and some of the strongest memories I have with my older sister are going shopping. And I'm now I think about that, I'm oh, kind of wish that wasn't the case.
But you know why that's like that though? If you look at our society, particularly media and films, the idea of shopping as a part of our culture is pushed on us through every element. You see it in all of my favorite movies. Pretty Woman, big mistake, huge. She's got those shopping bags. And there's this real idea that if you buy all the stuff, that person over there will treat you differently. That person will respect you more. That person will fall in love with you. And I think we internalize that from a very young age because that's what we see. But that's not really the reality. And that's not the world that we need to live in, because we have to be able to find our joy without transactions,
Yeah, definitely. So talking more about fashion and consumption, and getting more into things you cover in your book as well, how do you think fashion can lead us towards a better version of the world, and how that kind of ties into, the links between colonialism and climate, and why fixing fashion can also help us with those issues?
Yeah, so communities, I'm from the US, but obviously in the UK, school uniforms, right? It's something that most parents have to deal with. And it's one of those things where we should really have a school uniform recycling system for like every school system. We should, teach kids how to repair things. We should really form communities surrounding some of these issues. And that can also be a really beautiful thing. I grew up in a really community oriented space. So that's always sort of in the core of what I do. And I think that you can find community in so many places, but the fashion conversation is a great place to look for it. And so community is something that I would really stress. I mean, my sister is in Brooklyn and she got really into her Buy Nothing group during the pandemic. And now she calls me because she wants to talk about how she got some kale from her Buy Nothing group. And I'm like, great, but she's into it. That's great. And also the idea of, passing down clothing, passing it to friends. Right now, we have a system where when we clean out our closets, a lot of us turn to the charity shop. But in actuality, when I was moving over here, I had to decrease my possessions by a lot because we live in a pretty small London flat. And I had to go around and sort of find friends and say, this jacket's too small for me, but I think it would look really good on you. And that process of extending the life of my clothing almost brought me closer to some people. And sometimes I'll see someone take a picture and something on Facebook and I'm like, yeah, that's mine. And I love that. It's great. But that was also how I grew up. I wore a lot of hand-me-downs, and one of my friends on Facebook, who I've not seen in 15 odd years, posted a picture of herself as a child wearing these pink dungarees. And I said to her, I think I got those when you were done with them. And sure enough, I went in the family photo album, found the picture and shared it and was like, see, there's something that we've gotten away from connecting with our clothing. Mm-hmm. And that's because the supply chain that we currently deal with, especially if you go and buy from a lot of the stores, it can be as long as 50 people, which means that we don't have a connection to the makers anymore. And I think we need to get back to that. When you are slowing down and starting to really invest in companies that you can believe in, you actually form a bond with the people that make your clothing. And I think that that's a wonderful thing. My suit is Emperor's Cloth, and they're great. They reclaim vintage fabric, and then they can make you whatever you want out of it. So I could have gotten dungarees or a tea dress, but I opted for a suit because I've never had one. And why not have a mint green one? But yeah, this is vintage fabric from the 80s. And there's something beautiful about picking out and really waiting for something and being excited about it, but also, getting to know a company in a way where you understand what their mission is and what their goal is. And we've gotten away from that. So I think it's time for us to get back to that.
Definitely. I think that slow, more considered approach obviously can then apply to the rest of our lives as well, and how we consume other things. So yes, it's definitely an important point. Just for people who maybe are less in the know about fashion, obviously we're quite clued up. We've been talking about this stuff for years. Can you give a brief overview about how fashion is so tied to climate and some of these issues that we want to get rid of in our ideal world?
Yeah, so I was talking about fashion for a long time in one column, and then I started to talk about race and feminism and a lot of the other issues in another column, and then I went, oh, hold on. These all tie in together. And that's how my platform started to grow. And what you need to know about the modern fashion system is that it is largely a system that craps on non-white people. When we think about who makes the clothing, think about anything that you've bought that hasn't been made in this country. And if you think about who made that item, there's a very good chance that they're non-white and they live in the global south. There's a very good chance that the resources that went into that item were brought to you by a country that is not getting a fair deal for those resources. These are resource and labor-rich countries that are economically disadvantaged, and they shouldn't be. So obviously we need to fix these systems because this is not fair. And then, of course, at the end of our life cycle, this is the other part that people don't always know, we donate our clothing. And that is becoming quickly not very charitable at all, because at the rate at which fast fashion has sped up in the last 20 years, it is actually becoming an ecological crisis in the clothing in the countries that receive the clothing. So there's a very good chance that when you donate your clothing, 10% of it is probably going to get sold, and the other 90%, if it's in bad shape, it'll get landfilled, which is its own issue. And if it's not in terrible shape, it might get packed up and it might get sent back to the global south, and it might end up in Rwanda or Kenya or Ghana. And Ghana in particular, Kantamanto, is home to arguably the world's biggest secondhand market, but the rate at which the clothing is being received, to the tune of 15 million items a week, means that they're not selling that. When you think about their population, there's no way. And so the clothing has become an ecological crisis. It has filled up the municipal dump years in advance, like years. The dump has actually caught on fire, and it's been on fire for quite a long time. It ends up in the oceans. It washes up on the beaches. It pollutes the water. And that's another thing. If these clothing items are polluting the water, your skin is actually a living organism. You're wearing that on your body as well. So it is causing all sorts of issues. And in general, I think no matter who you are, at whatever income level you're at, we can all probably stand to just slow down. Now, different people are going to be able to do different things. Some people aren't going to be able to just go, right, I'm quitting fast fashion. I get that. But the average consumer currently buys 68 items of clothing a year. That's a lot of clothing. And I know everybody has the temptation to go, not me, not me. And I thought that too. And then I thought back upon the years when I was actually really into it. It was me. It was definitely me. And I think we need to start being more honest and thinking about how these purchases actually have impact. You know, because we've started to replace our joy with consumerism. You know, I did it for many years. You know, I'm having a bad day, I guess I'll go shopping. I'm having a good day, I guess I'll go shopping. I have a job interview, better get something new. Going on a date, yeah, I'll go and get something, you know. And so when we really sort of start to quantify how much we're buying and think about it from the perspective that no matter what the price tag is, somebody always pays the price. We talk about affordability, but the item of clothing that costs £5 is only affordable to the consumer. It is not affordable to the person who grew the cotton. It is not affordable to the person who made the garment. It is only affordable to the consumer. And it's not really affordable to us because it's trashing our planet and filling our oceans with microfibers. So that's the harsh news, but let's bring it up a notch to some more joy.
Yeah, that whole bit. I mean, I was aware of what happens to charity shops, but donations. But then that whole bit in your book about Canton Market, like just going into the depth of it, I was just like, oh my gosh.
It's a system that is actually hurting people, and I think we need to get away from the idea that donating is ultimately charitable, since fast fashion has become a problem.
Obviously, like, we have to pay attention to the consumer side of it, and, you know, as much as we need to call for system change, we can do what we can in our own lives as well. But
we need to call for corporate system change as well. Like, you know, obviously as consumers, I think we should know. We should know. But a lot of these corporations are actually getting away with literal murder.
Which is my next question was going to be, do you think that certain leading fast fashion brands, we can name a few, I guess. Let's say Primark, Shein, H&M, Boohoo, all these lovely names. Do you think they will exist in an ideal world, or do you think we're going to have to abolish them altogether? I know what my answer would be.
The idea that, like, you have to, like, get it at the lowest price possible is what those brands run off of. And if they don't change that, that's a model of extraction because somebody's paying the price for it. And if they don't change that model, then no, they don't get to exist in my ideal world.
think
In my ideal world, nobody feels pressured to buy 68 items of clothing a year. And in my ideal world, we raise wages for everyone because ultimately we're not in a great place ourselves. Obviously, we're in like one of the wealthiest countries in the world, obviously. But the gap between the extremely wealthy and the person who can never buy a house in London is actually an ocean.
Yeah.
So I think we need to change a lot of these systems, and also the model of outsourcing with clothing, right? Like, so currently, and a lot of people that aren't into fashion don't know this, brands don't own their own factory. They outsource the labor to the global south, and nobody does that to be altruistic. They do it because there is very little responsibility for them, and there's a ton of loopholes, and they can exploit people. Or when a global pandemic comes, they can just walk away from all the clothing they ordered 6 months in advance and leave the garment workers with no paycheck. And if you're already on starvation wages, that leaves you in starvation. So that system is exploitative as it is. And nobody seems too keen to get away from it. And if they're not willing to really change their ways, then no, they don't get to exist in my ideal world.
Yeah, I think one of the most ridiculous things I ever heard was, I think it was the CEO of H&M who said that like climate and social justice
We would be
activists
causing poverty
will be the ones causing the problem.
because people won't be buying fast fashion anymore. But, a very good journalist that I really like pointed out that his business model hasn't lifted anyone out of poverty. So who's the one causing poverty? Is it us or is it him? There's 5 billionaires in his family. I would argue they have a little bit to spare.
Do they want to give some to us as well, for all the hard work we've done at campaigning?
I know, right? There's also, and that's another thing. Like right now, we're obviously having really good dynamic conversations about wealth inequality. But everybody's looking at like Jeff Bezos, and don't get me wrong, go for that guy. Go for him.
Get him.
But nobody is looking at the top of the fast fashion supply chains, because you will find there is a hefty bunch of billionaires there as well. And they keep talking about how their businesses are doing great things, but we are not seeing any return on that. And I also want to say ignore the corporate responsibility page, because that is always a bunch of trash. It's always a bunch of trash. It's always a stock image photo of a South Asian woman smiling, and then they talk about how they built a well in one town, but they manufacture in thousands of factories, and a great many of them have polluted rivers because of those factories. So the corporate responsibility page is always there to make you feel better about buying the clothing, but not to address the fact that their tags were found in that factory fire recently that killed people. They never talk about that. And that's the thing. I used to always read about these things, and then I would run to the page of the fast fashion brand and go, what are they doing about this? And then I'd be greeted with this smiling stock image photo, and I'd go, oh, well, they're doing something. I don't know what it is, but they're doing something, and that's what it's there for. So you have to start ignoring that. When a brand actually holds its hand up and goes, yeah, we were involved in this, it's horrific. But usually when the press reaches out, they have no comment, but they should.
I think the next window I want to sit in is a Primark one, because I think they've got a new display which says "Empower Her," and it has an image of a garment worker.
Oh, that is really.
I'm coming
really
for
great.
them.
Should we do that tomorrow? I know I'm supposed to do some things, but
Speaking of wealthy people, something you talk about in your book, and also just I admire you so much for talking about, is integrity.
Yeah.
And something I wanted to ask was, what can we do to try and get more people to actually step up and hold that integrity, whether it's influencers or celebrities or even people who do have the privilege and keep saying, no, it's not me, I'm not part of the problem. Because
that is a really tough one, because honestly, I know people that do that. It's like, I really don't want to have this conversation with you, but it's going to take conversations. And it doesn't always have to be like, you're a bad person because you bought that, but more so changing how you hang out with your friends, because we do use shopping in our culture as a social thing. So maybe instead of, going shopping with your friend, be like, yeah, you know what? I'm actually only buying 30 items of clothing this year, but we should go to a museum instead. So changing the culture of our society is an important thing, but holding truth to power is important as well. Like challenging the narrative behind like social media. You know, recently we had Molly May, who was a Love Island contestant, who is now the creative director of Pretty Little Thing. When asked about all these things...
For the people listening on the podcast, Aja just rolled her eyes, which I very much respect.
When asked about the system of fast fashion and rapid turnover, which, by the way, is spurned on by social media 100%, she said, I don't know how we got to this place where we only wear our clothing more than once, or something along those lines. This is a woman who has millions of followers, and nobody is paying her to repeat her outfits. People are paying her to perpetuate this culture. So I think it's time to hold some feet to the fire there and ask people to be more honest. And it pisses me off because, like, my 13-year-old niece looks up to this person. I'm like, why? Like, I think that there is a lot of playing the fool sometimes with people that have platforms, because if I know how the sausage is made, the person that worked in the fashion industry for far longer than me definitely knows. And there's a lot of people with platforms that are kind of doing the whole see no evil thing. And I'm just like, don't play me for a fool, because I'm not, and neither are you.
Also, we both know people who are in a similar space to us, like how much money gets turned down if you do hold yourself to integrity. Like, I've turned a lot down.
So have I.
And I'm you know, I've got bills to pay. I'm not rolling in it.
I talk about living in like a London flat, and I swear if I took that evil money, I'd be in a really nice house.
Mm-hmm.
I know I would.
House. Your cats would have their own house.
They would have their own house, and then they wouldn't even use it because that's how cats are. I bought them like a 200-pound cat bed on Etsy from an ethical supplier. Mm-hmm. They don't even sit in it.
Of course they don't. They sit in the cardboard box.
Yeah, seriously. That's it. That's cats.
They're very sustainable.
They are very sustainable. They're starting to warm up to it, but I'm just like, what a schmuck I am.
So I think we are fairly near to the end. We got 15 more minutes.
That went really quick.
I did. We've covered a lot of good stuff, and I'm very happy about that. The fun question, which I know all my guests really enjoy, and hopefully everyone in the room will enjoy, is what would you invent in your ideal world? And it can be anything. It can be serious. It can be fun. Whatever you want. What's Aja's big invention, everyone? Drum roll.
Healthy donuts. Because donuts aren't healthy, but they're my favorite food, and I would eat them every day, all day, every day if I could. But I wouldn't say they're the most healthiest food. That's really... I'll come up with something better. I will say my real answer is probably... Should we wait for that to go by?
Nino.
Yeah,
if that's a cop, I say a cab.
Oh, okay.
It's my podcast.
It's your podcast. I would say, and in an ideal world, a teleporter so that I wouldn't have to get on a plane to see my family. And I also don't like flying. I really, really do not like flying. Like, finding out that flying wasn't good for the environment is like being a kid who like actually enjoys carrots, and then you realize you get bonus points for eating your vegetables. I was like, well, I won't fly as much then, because I'm terrified. So yeah, a teleporter so I don't have to fly.
Yeah, it's a good one. I also have family abroad, so I very much relate to that. Or just like cheaper train fares. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Especially for people in Europe.
This is very true. Cheaper, like more frequent trains, that sort of thing. That would be good as well.
Like free trains. We're being idealistic here.
Oh my God.
Free trains, I demand them.
I know. I'm like, we could just keep going with this all night.
Yeah. We want a free train which goes all over the world in some way, and has healthy donuts on board.
Well, I'll also say, like, one of the cool things about this country, I gotta give it to you. Big up the NHS, because I came from a country that doesn't have that.
It's very true. It's one of those things that we would probably most definitely keep, and also give loads more money and make it even better.
Because I see there's sharks circling at all times, so fight to keep it, because it's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so my last question I have here, but we also might have a little bit more time to talk about more stuff.
Yeah.
It says one thing, but what are some things, now we have more time, that listeners can do to help make your world a reality? So how can, maybe not the train, maybe not the healthy donuts, but everything else, what can we do to get there?
Challenge the narrative of consumerism at all points in your life. Like the holiday season, right? Like we buy so much crap in the holidays, but you know what? You don't have to buy new things. You can actually, my niece wanted a handbag from a designer that I don't really like, but she really wanted it. And I know how important it is for kids of a certain age to fit in because I was once that age. I found her the handbag secondhand, and you know what? Hers is real, and all of her friends are fake. And I'm trying to slowly teach her that actually, if you go the secondhand route, you can actually access the things you really want, and you don't have to go and buy, something that costs $5. But if you save your money, you can get the real thing, and that actually it's going to stay with you for a while, and you're going to be really excited about that. So, last year for the holidays was all secondhand. My partner got a secondhand sweatshirt, which he really likes. And I think we need to get away from this idea that we do newness at every turn. And we need to change the culture surrounding that, because there is still quite a stigma about secondhand clothing. And I know that, like, I'm in London, and Londoners love to be like, oh, everybody wears it now. That's not true. We need to get rid of that stigma. It's in our culture, and I get why it's there, but we need to definitely change that. So, if every person who participates in the fashion system just bought a few items secondhand, we could really start to change the way this supply chain is looking. And I think, if you challenge yourself to do that and, really keep track of what you're purchasing and emotional spending and stuff like that, I think that's a great place to start. Obviously people are like, I want, what are the sustainable brands? But I think thinking about buying less is the best place to start. If you need to get your pants from a store that doesn't have the best supply chain, I'm not going to like show up and slap them out of your hand, but maybe you don't need to buy like 5 new dresses while you're there. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to like judge, because it's going to be different for every person. But I think just thinking about these systems and thinking about how we spend our money and passive buying, it's a great place to start.
Yeah, I've found that I've ended up being like the family ethical police. Like, my brother will be like,
Did you just say ACAB, by the way?
Okay. My brother will be like, oh, I had to buy like something from H&M or something. I'm like, why are you telling me? Like, in a
People
way,
do that
like,
to me
in a way, like,
too.
I don't really want to know.
Yeah.
Like, I know you know what I do. I go out and I sat in their window. Like,
yeah.
I know you get it. Just, I'm not going to...
You do become like the guilt police. Like, people will be like, it's this. And I'm like, okay, but how old is it? And they're like 5 years. And I'm like, that's
okay.
all right. If it's 5 years old, because I still wear the stuff in my wardrobe from that. If it still works, some of it doesn't, because if it's assembled very quickly for fast turnover, it might not last you 5 years. But for the stuff that I have, I'm still going to wear it. I paid money for it.
That's literally my approach now. If it works, I'm still going to wear it. Like, I have pajama bottoms from Primark from like literally 10 years ago. I think the waistbands come out, but like, it still works.
If it still works, you should still wear it. Like, I'm not trying to be like, you're a bad person for wearing that. Mm-hmm. Like, nobody likes that person. That's not how we get people into the conversation. But educating people and helping to think of alternatives to like the system, that's how we form a community. And that's what I'm about at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. I'll never sit up here and say that like, I'm better than you because I'm wearing a suit made out of recycled fabric, although I do feel pretty like... That doesn't make me better. It just means that like I've been looking at this for a long time. But I like to try and encourage people. And I get so excited when somebody says like, I just found this brand. They're actually really cool. And I'm excited about that. And I would like for us to get back to this joy of like supporting businesses that we actually want to support and we feel that we can actually believe in. Mm. Because right now I feel like fast fashions kind of suck the joy out of it. We think it's joy, but it's just dopamine. And that dissipates as soon as you get home and your mom says, how much money did you spend today?
And that's like actual science, like actually.
Yeah.
scientifically proven that it
feels good at the till, feels weird when you're sneaking it into your parents' house at midnight. She left it in your car, and you don't want your mom to know.
Also, the bit about like, you know, Christmas and stuff like that. And I mean, really, it's just an excuse now. I say my presence is the present, especially if I'm traveling to see family. I'm like, I'll give you a small gift, and it might be secondhand, but also I'm here. It's a great way to justify.
Are we both the insufferable ones in our family?
I think maybe.
Maybe just a little bit.
Also, I guess I'll add on a question here as we're at the Lit Fest. Part of my podcast was inspired by a couple of books I read, which include The Future Earth by Eric Holthaus, which goes into kind of like a fictional view of what would happen if we actually took climate action. And it's kind of realistic, but also, you know, it's an ideal world in one way. And also All We Can Save, which is an anthology of essays and poems. And
Marianne Hitt was at TED, and she is wonderful.
Wow.
Wonderful. Some of the essayists from the... we were going to get to TED.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's another book that inspired me. One of the essays talks about like how like culture and art and how having these types of conversations is really important. And when I read that, I was like, okay, that's the push I needed to make this podcast. So I was wondering, like, what books other than All We Can Save, which I know you also love.
I recommend everyone read that, because obviously, like, climate emergency isn't a fun topic, but there's hope. There is hope. The difference between 1 degree and 2 degree and the type of world that we live in, it's a big difference. And we can still have that, you know, as Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, co-author of All We Can Save, co-editor, says, the future we want is still on the table. It's up for grabs, but we have to like work now. We've got to do it now. All We Can Save is a fantastic one. You've taken my book. That's always the one I recommend.
Talk about your books some more.
Well, I know, right? Like,
got time.
Well, I do actually have a book I can recommend. There's a lot of great literature out there. I mean, I also like Elizabeth Klein's books are really amazing, particularly about this topic. Dana Thomas has a book called Fashionopolis. Lucy Siegel has a book. There's been a lot of people writing on this, but I think mine is a little bit different because it's semi-autobiographical, but it also talks about how this system impacts, you know, non-white people particularly, because the thing about sustainable fashion is that it is still a relatively new idea. For a long time, we did not really truly understand how much damage the fashion industry was doing. So there's a lot of new stuff coming out every day, and my book has pictures. not to toot my own horn, but I love a picture book. Shall I do a
self-plug as well, that I worked on your gift stickers for your book?
Indeed.
If you buy Aja's book and you post a picture on Instagram, you can search Aja Barber on the Instagram gift stickers and you can use them.
You should buy my book, but you can actually just use them if you don't. But buy the book, please.
We do have a few minutes, but honestly, I'm like really happy with this conversation, and I'm so...
Should we talk about TED?
Yeah, actually, no, go ahead. Fill those last few minutes.
Would you like to ask me any...
I don't know the specific question off the top of my head, so I'm happy for you to just like build on what we spoke about earlier. Amazing action that happened where holding people to account in those spaces of wealth, and
it is
having that
time for us to get loud about corporate polluters, because honestly, this idea of like, let's have a nice quiet discussion where everyone feels comfortable. I don't think that everyone should feel comfortable, because the damage that the fossil fuel industry has done to aid in this problem is far higher than your carbon footprint. By the way, carbon footprint, that was invented by British Petroleum to make the consumer feel more responsible.
Ooh.
Yeah, so the carbon footprint stuff, obviously we should all change the way we look at some of these systems we participate in. But never forget who's truly to blame for this. And it's time for people to be a lot less comfortable. If you've made a lot of money from a system that's arguably heating up the planet and going to take us all with it, I would say you don't get to sit on the stage and be comfortable. So at TED, there were some amazing local organizers who managed to get into the conversation and speak truth to power. And we need more of that in our society. I'm tired of the nice conversations. I want this planet to be around for the next few generations. And at the rate that we're going, it's not going to be. So it's time to hold people to account. We're past the time of comfortable conversation.
And I will note that some of those organizers, I think it's a good opportunity to bring this up for anyone wanting to get engaged in the climate stuff. Some of those organizers were from a campaign called Stop Cambo.
Yes.
Cambo is an oil field that Shell, who were at TED, and I can't remember the other fossil fuel company off the top of my head.
Oh, Shell's got like a 30% stake,
Okay, well,
right?
Shell, one of the big ones.
They've got a big
They're
stake.
pushing for this new oil field in the North Sea off of Scotland. And yeah,
This is not Paris Agreement stuff. Like, you know,
in a
our
climate
politicians are
emergency.
saying they're going to meet it, but how are you going to do it with this? Like, it's obviously not in the guidelines.
Yeah, so yeah, that's an amazing campaign, and they were some of the people.
They were
it.
the people. They organized it. They organized it. They got the message out to people like me who were attending. I would say about a fifth of the auditorium walked out with them, which definitely rattled people a bit, and we need more of those actions.
So yeah, definitely look up Stop Cambo and on social media, and you can actually see that action as well.
The thing that annoys me the most about the fossil fuel industry is that they're really good at lying. Like, one of the things that he said, you know, you guys need us. You need us. And I'm from the U.S., and I can tell you the fossil fuel industry has dismantled American democracy. There are towns in the U.S. like Nashville where people that have lots of money will dismantle public transportation in cities because America is so car dependent. That has happened. There is New York Times articles about this. It is well documented. That's the fossil fuel industry hard at work. So when the CEO of Shell says, you need us, I'm like, let's talk about that need and who created that need. Because I think a lot of Americans would like public transport, but we are a rather car-heavy country. Who did that to us? Because it wasn't me. So take your
Also
carbon
linking to
footprint and shove it.
Also linking to fashion, who in here is wearing some polyester? Has anyone checked the tags on their clothes? Probably are, because
Do you know what polyester is?
who makes polyester?
Fossil fuels. It
Ah.
is plastic. And that's something that is a conversation, because I get it. If you're not in fashion or whatever, it's okay if you don't know that. But we need to understand that with the pressure that the fossil fuel industry is currently facing, they are looking to divert into different directions so that there is a use for their product. And one of them is making sure that polyester is in everything you buy. That was very deliberate. And, you know, we've always had polyester, but the rate at which you look at the tag and there's polyester and everything, that was by design. So there's a lot of tie-ins. And it's important to know that.
Yeah, definitely. We've got 2 minutes, but again, I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I'm still thinking of that train and the healthy donuts on it. So hopefully we can take that image, and that can be our motivation.
I can't believe that was my invention. My goodness.
Everyone who comes on the podcast is always like, I can't believe that's what it is, but like, it's
like what you
fun.
like.
We like what we like, exactly.
I just want to say, if you didn't know a lot of this stuff, it's okay, because the fashion industry has done a really good job of creating a web of mystery where, like, the average consumer doesn't know. But, you know, it's good to understand these things and to also see how social media plays into it, because fashion has spread up and has sped up dramatically in 20 years. And so is social media. And there's definitely a connection there.
Fill your feeds with people who are going against the system.
Yes.
Follow Aja. Follow myself.
Oh, Megan.
Follow Megan. Follow Kenny.
Kenny?
Thank you for coming, by the way.
Yeah. There's a lot of great people to follow, to feel inspired, who are trying to do things a little bit differently, who recognize that there's some harm done. And if you're not feeling inspired by the people that fill your social media feed, change that.
Yeah.
You're in control of that.
Yeah. We're not just consumers. We are citizens.
We
with
are
power.
citizens always, and that's what we need to get back to.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.